while using LLMs, you might have come across the term skills. We're going to go over what they are. So when you're interacting with an LLM like Claude or ChatGPT, you're interacting with it in natural language. You're just like typing in English and it's interpreting, doing natural language processing over the words that you give it. And that's how it determines what to do and what output to give you. Now, sometimes you want to do a specific and repetitive task. One example is doing a security review. So sometimes you want to say, Claude, hey, look for any security vulnerabilities. So to make it more consistent and run through a set of steps, you can create a skill. This was essentially released maybe like a month ago. This is a blog post by Anthropic, and it defines the skill.md. So it's just a markdown file, and markdown, we'll see, it's just a text file. It's a text file that has a specific format just for it can be rendered in a nice way. But yeah, it's just a text file written in English. And they say now that like skills and commands are essentially the same thing. So I have another video on the /security-review command that you can run in Claude Code. That is essentially now the equivalent of a skill. So it has its own repo and it's a prompt in itself. It's describing to the agent how to run a security review, what commands to take, but also the logic and the process of running a security review. As you can see, you're a senior security engineer, you're doing a security review. Your objective is to find high confidence security vulnerabilities. And it even defines categories of findings and vulnerabilities to look for. And it even breaks it down in phases. But the idea of this markdown file is just in English describing a set of steps that the agent should take. Now, this is a markdown file that's rendered nicely, but the raw markdown file itself, this is what the markdown file actually looks like. It's just text. It's just a long blob of text. And so here they basically define that skills, same as commands, for Claude, they're typically under the hidden Claude folder, .claude/skills. So given that they're just prompts, essentially, people really like sharing these prompts. So let's say I don't know how to run a security review. Someone else can send me their skill to run security review. Also, I've seen ones for designers, for example. Here are some aesthetic principles on how I want my websites to look, and you can put those within a skill. And then Claude, whenever it's trying to design a website, it will look at the skill itself. And so you can either explicitly invoke it by referencing the skill name with a slash, or essentially in natural language also, it can infer that you're trying to reference something defined by that skill, and it will go and basically run the prompt of everything in that skill itself. Now, because people are really fans of sharing skills with each other, we've seen a few people just like upload them to their own GitHub and share that GitHub. A few companies made their own skills marketplace, and for example here this is Vercel's skill marketplace, and it's a way for people to share skills. It has a few of its own issues, like it installs globally. It tries to shove all of these skills in every single agent you could possibly use. And it aggressively tries to recommend other skills. But for now, I want to focus on the skills themselves. And if you look here, you might see one like, for example, browser use here. That's a popular one. And browser use tells your agent how to use a browser, how to automate browser use. And this is what you see on the skills.sh website. But then we can actually go to its own GitHub and we can read the whole markdown, and the skill is the markdown. It's just one text file, and you can see the raw file here. And this is a interesting example because browsers are risky to use because they hold a lot of your data. And this skill is trying to define how to use a browser. And ideally, you want to review the markdown file. And in this example of browser use, if someone can control your browser, they can control all of the data that's in your browser, which can be very sensitive. And so this is an inherently risky skill. And one thing to emphasize is in these markdown files, because we're sharing markdown files with each other, you want to determine like, okay, is it safe for me to use someone else's markdown file? How do you answer that question? And there's an inherent problem here, which is these markdown files are written in plain English. So to determine if a markdown file is safe to use or not, you have to extract the intent of natural language, which is a very difficult problem, not only for computers, but also for us as humans. How do I know if something's trying to mislead me or not? And so to give an example, we have to talk about Zach Corman. You should follow him on Twitter. He has been posting a lot about skills and issues with skills. And I want to just summarize very quickly. um a really good example is this tweet here. So he made his own skill that just showed an image. So in Markdown, if you want to render an image, you can have square brackets and then link to the image itself. And in the rendered Markdown, which is what the skills.sh website shows you, you just see an image. But for the agent processing the skill, it reads the alt text of the image, which essentially tells it to run a command. This is command injection, arbitrary command execution. It's fetching something from an external website we don't know about, we don't trust, and it pipes it into bash, so it just immediately executes it. And he tested that and it worked. And so in this case, it's using English to tell it to run a command. Now, he has a lot of different examples. They don't all have to be command execution. You can manipulate the agent. You can basically do prompt injection. I mean, you control the skill. The skill is the prompt. You are injecting context and instructions into the context of someone else's agent. So it's very hard to determine the intent of any skill. They're very hard to review in general. He has a really good other tweet. So recently, skills.sh and some other marketplaces have been publishing skills scanners. And this is, in a sense, the traditional definition of a scanner, like static analysis. It's looking for known patterns inside skills. And they can identify some very basic, very trivial attempts at just being malicious within a skill, but they don't really work well. First, they don't catch everything, obviously, but second of all, even in the way you use skills.sh here, this is a really good screenshot that Zach made. It shows you that he wants to find a skill for browser use, and so the tool here, the skills.sh tool, which is like recommends other people's skills, it just recommended the browser use skill, which is the one we saw earlier. And what's funny is that this particular skill had failed all of the security checks that they added recently. And even though it failed, it recommends to install this one, does not warn of anything, just recommends it, goes ahead, installs it globally, which means for all possible agents you could be running on your machine, even ones you don't have installed. And after it's installed it, a very small note at the end, like, by the way, this has critical vulnerabilities with it. There's critical risks associated with it. That's not very effective as a security control. It's also normalizing people just like accepting any errors they may see from it. But the idea is that skills scanners aren't even the right place to be looking for issues in skills. And there's a few reasons why. So first, you have to check out Zach's YouTube account. He only has a few videos, but many of them on skills and agentic security. This one's an interview with Ali, who is also extremely knowledgeable on AI security. And I've also had a long interview with him specifically on like, can marketplaces actually run scans to determine issues in skills, and is that an effective control? And basically the gist of it is that that's not really the right place to determine the issues with the possible intent of a skill. And the reason is, no matter what you try, ultimately, you don't really know how the agent is going to interpret that skill or any prompt or any instruction and what it actually does during runtime. And so there's many layers of security here that have to apply. And more importantly, what's running at runtime, like what the agent is actually doing, is more important than what I think the skill is telling it to do. So overall, just to conclude, skills are useful. There are really good use cases for them, like the security review skill, and it can be nice to share skills with other people. But my recommendation is to make your own skills. You can copy paste some snippets that you trust from other people. You can get inspired by other people's skills, but you should really be writing your own skills. And the main reason is this tweet by Dino that I really like. I've been thinking about this since I read it back in June of last year. So there's an Emesian parable by Eames, who is a furniture designer, and it basically says never delegate understanding. And that is extremely powerful to apply in the context of AI and agents. Ever since I started thinking about this, it really improved how I use AI and agents. And the main idea is that once I delegate understanding to the agent, once I assume like I'm not really going to understand how this works, the agent's just going to understand it for me and it's going to do its own thing. This is almost inevitably where I start running into problems that I cannot debug myself out of. You really have to be the one with the understanding, with the context, and you're the one telling the agent how to solve something. And to hold to that principle, when you use skills, you should be using skills that you understand well. So overall, useful tech to use, just make sure you understand them and don't paste blindly, similarly to how you wouldn't want to run arbitrary code that you don't understand on your machine.